Minister, it's absolutely true to say that the RTE omni-shambles is dragging on for months and months, and by the month, it's getting worse under your own management at the moment. It's a depressing soap opera that is dragging down the confidence of the people within RTE at the moment. It's having a financial impact as well, because we see that the licence fees collected are collapsing, which is obviously damaging to RTE as well. And it's also having a significant effect in terms of the morale within RTE. So your stewardship of this particular role over the last 9 months has led to a situation where things are getting worse in terms of RTE. And even that issue of the licence fee, it's important to say this. This government won't make a decision about the licence fee, because inertia for this government is a better strategy in the year of an election. They simply won't make a decision, because they will not risk taking a decision in case it has a negative effect over your election chances with the people of Ireland. Now, one of the things that's really frustrating about this fiasco factory is that it is eclipsing so much of what's happening in Ireland at the moment. You know, there is incredible difficulties happening. I can think of the National Children's Hospital, and sometimes I think, is it easier for people to understand a €200,000 exit package than a €2.25 billion waste of investment in terms of the National Children's Hospital's overspend in the last while? We have 3,150 people who have died as a result of accidents in the HSE over the last 5 years. 1,100 people who are dead by the time an ambulance arrived, because ambulances are getting later and later. €300 million spent on Metro North and not a shovel put into the ground. We have actually people in Middleton staying awake at night as human water gauges because of the lack of flood defences. And yet the bandwidth within Leinster House has been pretty much consumed by this ongoing, this rolling omni-shambles which you're involved in, Minister. Now, even within RTE itself, really big questions such as bogus self-employment are still not being dealt with currently. And that dichotomy that exists within Irish society between the inner circle that are able to achieve the golden handshakes, and then the mothers and fathers who are in the middle of a commuter hell trying to get to work, being forced onto bogus self-employment contracts. In other words, to insulate their employers from having to pay proper sick pay or proper holiday pay or proper pension entitlements as well. None of those issues being dealt with, because here we are flooded with a fiasco factory that continues to provide these problems over the last while. Now, it's obviously the case that the Minister has not been sure-footed, and that's the kindest I can be in terms of the Minister in the last while. You know, sacking the chair of the RTE board on television the day before you're meant to speak to the individual is incredible. It's impossible to understand that a senior minister would not expect a question from Miriam O'Callaghan in terms of confidence in the chair. And if it is the case that you were not expecting that, would that ask serious questions of your ability to do the job, of your experience? Are you experienced enough to be able to fulfill this particular role? But the deep problem, I think, here is that the Minister is approaching these problems in an extraordinarily bureaucratic fashion. And I think the item that highlights that the most is that information was given to the head of your department last October, which indicated that there was a conclusion to the negotiations. Now, anybody with an ounce of curiosity would ask, what is the conclusion of the negotiations? Well, you're a minister, you didn't even ask that question. Now, I think that strategic ignorance has been a strategy by ministers in the past, in relation to these types of things. Don't ask, because if you ask, well then you know the information and then you're responsible for that information. Or say that senior people in your department don't tell you this information. Again, that insulates you from responsibility in terms of that. But it's not credible at all, Minister. It's not credible. I don't think anybody believes it in the whole country. And continuing with the pretense that nobody in your department asked what were the results of the conclusions of that negotiations. Nobody there is just impossible to believe. And even the case where letters were being written to the chair, instead of just picking up the phone, issues where your connection with RTE was through the chair and not through anybody else, shows an approach that's not a fix it and get up and go and resolve it in a practical issue. It shows an approach of a person fully confined and limited to very narrow avenues of trying to resolve really important questions. And what you need is a practical fixer in those situations, rather than a person who's literally going to just be a functionary on the sidelines to the crisis that's happening at the moment. So I would ask you to deal with that. How come nobody asked the question of the results of those negotiations? Also, I'd ask the question, Minister, if you can, just to let us know the timeline of when you spoke to your party leader or the Taoiseach in terms, or by phone or by text, in terms of the primetime interview, and also just to explain why did Catherine Licken leave the department? What were the reasons for her leaving her particular role?
Go to the